Greetings, fellow tarot travelers, tripping through the tetrahedral triptych of cards I shall now lay before you. I'm Tarot Torch, and it has come to our attention that we must now address a very important topic, and it is the topic of landmines and the environment. Well, this is a big issue. You know, the first landmines that were actually used as a high explosive device where the metal was wielded in such a way that it was a single unit, was first used in the Battle of Yorktown by Confederate troops during the American Civil War in 1862. And I looked at some of my decks from around that year and didn't feel comfortable in using those decks. They didn't seem to speak to the spirit of the issue. So today I've chosen the Zombie Tarot and the Taroccio Napoleonico. These are two very different cards, let me tell you right now. And I'm not sure how they're going to blend on the table. This is the big experiment. The Zombie Tarot I'd like to use because it's a humorous deck that shows zombies taking over the world. In fact, it's drawn on very inexpensive cardboard because at the zombie takeover of our planet, only cheap cardboard was left in the back alleyway where someone drew up these cards to leave some enlightening proof that humans had an elevated level behind. It's a very humorous deck, but it does show, on some level, mutilation of bodies. And I wanted to show that because, not to be gory, but because this is an issue about landmines. And to not show that would somehow be to not convey what we're trying to address. Then I wanted the Taroccio Napoleonico by Il Maneghello from Milano, Italy, because this deck shows the austerity of government and war. It's a real conquer from the empire type of deck. And you know, that's the militarism that would make descending decisions from descending authority to do things like put landmines out and to slaughter the peasants. And I thought these two decks might help convey artistically what I wish to state. Biodiversity can be threatened by landmines in certain regions by wiping out vegetation and possible wildlife during explosions or demining. Landmines also can pose an extra burden for threatened and endangered species, pushing species to extinction. They have been known to be used to target endangered species by poachers. Displaced people and refugees can further contribute to the loss of biodiversity when they hunt animals for food or destroy their habitat in order to make shelters for themselves after being forced to do so because of the presence of landmines. Shrapnel or abrasions of their bark or roots caused by detonated mines can cause the slow death of trees and provide entry sites for wood-rotting fungi. Those areas where the land is no longer able to be used for farming practices because of landmines make residents resort to the forests to meet their survival needs. This makes for many forested areas to become exploited by affected populations, furthering the loss of biodiversity. Contaminated soils, particularly with heavy metals, is a very common observance in areas close to mines after they explode or decay. Products produced from the explosive, both organic and inorganic substances, are most likely to be long-lasting, water-soluble, and toxic even in small amounts. They can be implemented either directly or indirectly into the soil, water bodies, into microorganisms and plants with just drinking water, into food products, or during respiration. Toxic compounds can also find its way into important water areas and cause bioaccumulation within land, animals, fish, and plants. Their effects can be deadly to some animals and other organisms by acting as a nerve poison to hamper growth. One study in central Vietnam found that 7,000 hectares of land enough to support 12,000 families, continued to remain unproductive because of landmines. The presence of landmines in previous inhabited areas may also cause population shifts, resulting in overcrowding in urban areas with a subsequently increased risk of infectious transmission. Reconstruction and development efforts of important structures, including schools and hospitals, are also likely to be delayed by the presence of landmines. When and how will the use of IEDs, landmines, anti-handling devices, and anti-tank mines come to an end, and we can stop harming the earth in such a direct assault on life? Will the estimated 800,000 landmines in the Korean DMZ alone ever be removed? Can we stop the genocide with special attention to stopping the infanticide caused by landmines soon? Would making countries liable for medical and funerary costs inhibit their usage? Can we demand that countries using landmines buy high-rate insurance? Well, those are some very good, deep and probing questions that we have no answers for. And when we have no answers, it's time to ask the tarot. I'm sure you're all wanting to see what this zombie deck is about. I don't use it very often, to be very honest. I did manage to put it all right side upside, so we can use it today. But its pictures, and I'll run through just one or two, tend to be on the gory side. But it's that goriness that is an endless reminder as to the harm that is created by landmines. And I want to explain that these are not always, in every instance, exploding body parts, but they should suggest to the viewer that this is a very, very serious topic. So we shuffle the deck and cut it, ensuring that it is all unknown to myself and to the audience. And we put these cards to the side and open up the second box. This deck I've used quite a bit on my Instagram account, and it's a wonderful deck. That account is spelt Tarot Torch, one word, with only one T in the middle. And it's a run-on word, and that's just how I ran the page. So let's see if this deck helps us to understand the militaristic and governmental angle of it all. All right, so we want to keep these cards in the picture, but we need enough space to put out a layout. So I'm going to put these like this so everybody can tell that it's the decks I'm using. All right, so let us begin. I think we'll first take a governmental view of things. We have here the Three of Cups, the Wheel of Fortune, oops, I did get one card upside down. You know what happens, no matter how much you straighten these cards out, there's always one that wants to appear upside down. And the Ten of Swords. Below, with the Zombie Tarot, we will have the Queen of Cups, the Two of Swords, and the Page of Hazards. How funny. So, as you can see, actually these cards do kind of blend well in a funny way. Let's begin at the beginning. The Three of Cups shows that there's an earnest desire to give birth to a greater consciousness that will help us to rise above landmines. No one in their right mind would support such a thing. The Three of Cups is all about birthing and giving birth, but it can give birth to good things and to bad things. And as you see in this Napoleonic deck, the medallions from the Napoleonic War are here being shown as though this is a noble thing to go kill and maim and die for. And beneath this desire to end landmines is the Queen of Cups. She relates specifically to the cup of the Three of Cups above. In this case, she's eating someone's brains. But the idea here is that with her torn body structure showing her ligament and bones and body parts being present, that indeed we're dealing with people who are literally exploding on the spot because they made a left turn and stepped on a landmine, or a right turn, depending on which situation they're in. And so the Queen of Cups says, look, there's a lot of these landmines on the ground, and even if we demine them and remove the landmines, there's more on the ground than we realize. In fact, there's an empire of landmines on the ground. There are so many in so many diverse places, it's almost impossible to remove them all. But efforts should be made, even if it's a little bit at a time. The governmental view here is speaking of the Wheel of Fortune, la roue de fortune. And here you can see the captain sitting on the wheel, but it's the wheel of a cannon. And what's in his hand is what stuffs the cannon barrel with the ball and the gunpowder. So what we have here is a statement about governments coming and going. One 4-year period, it's a Democrat, another 4-year Republicans. Once it's a right-winger, then it's a left-winger. One country may have a monarch and be communist the next moment. And because there's a constant turnover of multiple governments in multiple regions of the earth, it's hard to get a consistent answer on landmines. A current regime may want to remove the landmines, but 5 years later, a new regime wants to install them. And what's being said here is that the arm traders and the turnover of governments prohibits the idea of ever removing them all. The Queen of Cups certainly speaks of too many to remove in the first place. Now, below the Wheel of Fortune is the Two of Swords. And the Two of Swords is a very violent card showing a beheading. But you know what? That's what happens when people stand on landmines. And the Two of Swords speaks of boundaries. That one of the reasons why we have landmines is because my people should own this land. Your people should own that land. And instead of putting up a fence, and instead of having laws and honoring treaties and trade agreements, we have to put up landmines to divide regions. And we have to put up landmines to entrap people because we want their military dead so we can take over that region of land. This seems to be at the core of it all. The boundaries. The boundaries are what the boundaries and the turnover of governments. This seems to be what perpetuates the problem of the landmine empire, even though the public sentiment would like to see them removed. And there are small, meaningful, but not terribly significant movements to remove landmines here and there. Next is the Page of Hazards. Now, the Page of Hazards is a very interesting card. As you see, the child is chained to a mailbox and has newspapers in his hands. And of course, the child looks like he's been hit by a landmine. Well, what this speaks of is the fact that there are laws that are written, there are UN mandates, international tribunals, there's all kinds of written literature opposing the use of landmines, including statistics that would break anybody's heart. But the child that's been hit by the landmine, the child that lost a leg or an arm or lost its parents, is chained to the mailbox, waiting to hear from the Ten of Swords, the card of complete and total exhaustion. You fired all your bullets, so you pulled out your swords and daggers till they're dull, and you fist fight till finally you can just lay there on the ground in complete exhaustion. All resources depleted, everything's depleted, everything's used up. Now, why would these two cards be the outcome? I would suggest that there's a pointlessness prescribed by governments that seek to undermine the people and want to sustain this whole idea of landmines. And that no matter how long the public and the victims wait, chained to the mailbox, waiting to hear from their government to solve this enormous problem, the only thing that happens is exhaustion. Exhaustion of the people waiting, exhaustion of the government fighting, exhaustion of the people who want to remove the landmines for humanistic reasons. Everybody is exhausted and tired of waiting. What we need is action now. And as we stand at the crossroads, and even though it's a violent crossroads, and even though the nations of the world seem to turn over fast, we need to have action now, standing at this crossroads, where we make a decision to remove all landmines for the sake of life on earth.